In Virginia, Richmond, Lynchburg, and Alexandria have antiquated combined sewer overflow systems that need to be replaced under federal laws and regulations. Now, the Department of Environmental Quality at the state level, though, implements those regulations. The cost of these efforts will be the tens of thousands, hundreds of millions of dollars. Do you think that the local government authorities should have more or less time to fix this problem? And do you think the state should offer any financial assistance to help do so?
Well, certainly I would like financial assistance. As someone who has spent a lot of time canvassing in the rain and walking in raw sewage, I can tell you this is a real, we all know this, we all live here. We all know that we have raw sewage in our streets that flows into the Potomac. It only happens when we have a very heavy rain, because these antiquated systems actually do handle it 90–95% of the time. So what do you do in a heavy rain? How do you keep that extra water from going into sewers? There are ways to do something about that, and it's a lot cheaper than replacing the entire system. What you do is you have things like called permeable pavers, right? You have those little pavers, and they allow water to seep into the ground, and it's not getting in our sewers, it's not making raw sewage run in our streets. You have rain barrels. That's a cheap solution. You collect the rain, you use it to water your flowers on a sunny day, and in doing so, you keep the excess water from going in the sewers, you keep the raw sewage from going in our streets. The District of Columbia and Montgomery County, Maryland give tax incentives to homeowners to do these very simple, far more inexpensive solutions, permeable pavers, rain barrels, any of these water collection systems. If enough people did that here, and were incentivized to do that here, we wouldn't have much raw sewage growing in the streets. Maybe they would give us more time because it wouldn't be as much of a problem. There are easier ways to solve this problem. Obviously, if the feds do require it, I'd love some state aid. Richmond got a little aid. I think it's only fair that Alexandria gets a little aid. But at the end of the day, there are cheaper, better ways to do this.
Dr.
Obviously, if there's federal money, we'd like federal money. If Richmond chose to appropriate money, we'd appreciate it. I'm not sure any of us really want this to take any longer than necessary, but it is part of a much bigger problem we have with infrastructure investment in general. We don't have the opportunity always to plan effectively, and we don't always have the capacity to plan effectively. It's why we have schools that are teeming with students instead of the investments that we actually need to make in terms of enough schools. It's why we have this particular issue. It's the same reason we are under the gun around our road systems. We don't, as a country and as a Commonwealth, have the systems in place to adequately follow trends, to plan for long-term investment, and our funding cycles are not driven that way, right? We have a 2-year election cycle and an annual funding cycle. And, and here we have a 2-year budget here. But those funding cycles tend to drive short-term decision-making. I think we actually need to think a much bigger picture as opposed to shorter picture around how we actually plan for our infrastructure in general. Thank you very much.
Mr. Tom.
I think we definitely need to make greater investments in our infrastructure area. I live in North Old Town, just a few blocks away from the Potomac River, and I think that these problems may even get worse over time due to climate change and sea level rise, and I think that that has a huge impact, environmental impact, that we have to address as a state. I think this burden should not be, solely or mostly borne by the local communities. I think there should be more state and federal assistance.
Mr. Fine.
Well, I too oppose raw sewage flowing into our rivers. One aspect that hasn't been discussed is that we have all private utilities in our area. And those utilities are largely regulated by state government and to some degree federal government, and the localities have very little ability to regulate them. So what happens in the areas of water service, but also electric service, cable service, other utilities, is that by the time we reach capacity problems, it's too late for a manageable solution, and we're faced with huge bills to try to add a huge new power line somewhere, or to separate our combined sewer system, or to add modern telecommunications infrastructure. So I think, again, in an effort to seem business friendly, Republicans have tended to shy away from the safeguards that would result in safer, more reliable, cleaner utilities, not just in water and sewer, but also in electricity and and in cable and all of our other utilities. So the efforts to back off further from Dominion in this last session were an indication of that mentality. We need quite the opposite. We need to keep the pressure on these utilities to serve the public from which they benefit in the form of all of the access they have to our infrastructure.
Mr. Altmer.
So certainly the issue of our combined sewer system is one that we've been dealing with since really the foundation of Alexandria. And the two sections of Alexandria that do have the combined sanitary sewer system, they suffer from it. And the point that we've heard about our long-term investment strategies not existing is absolutely true. We look to developers to fund infrastructure improvements such as road, water, sewer for those new developments. Yet we don't put the funding into our long-term plan to maintain. And so we've got a significant deferred maintenance program. That's significant deferred maintenance issue is not exclusive to Alexandria. It's a problem across the country. We've got something like $3 trillion worth of deferred maintenance in our civil engineering requirements across the country. And where is that money going to come from? So to the extent that we are worried about raw sewage flooding into our basements or down the streets or into the waterfront, we absolutely have to do something about that. And you know, the American Society of Civil Engineers do rate our sewer system the worst in Virginia out of all of our infrastructure. We do need to pay attention to this, and it does need to be something that's addressed not only at the state level, but at the local level and the federal level. I think localities should take the time they need to get it right, because I certainly don't want raw sewage in my basement if we get it wrong.